Speedy world, I am Syed Shabahat Ali and you're watching Fault Lines. Recently, a meeting took place between the defense chiefs of China and the United States of America in Singapore, in the place which is called Shangri-La. It is very pertinent and important to note that as the situation is getting worsened between the two sides with the developments of their aggressive naval postures against each other, these talks were very significant and important. And let me remind you that recently in April 2024, Antony Blinken had also had an official visit of China where he met President Xi Jinping and his counterpart in China as well. But what exactly is happening behind the curtain? Why situation has become such a hot pot of geopolitics, and what is happening between these two rivals, who have crossed horns with each other over such a long period of time? To talk about this very pertinent subject, I've invited Shakeel, Ahmad, Ramay Sahab, who's an expert of Chinese affairs and his guest in the studio. Ramay Sahab, I welcome you to the show.
Thank you.
So first things first, help us to understand the background of these talks that have recently taken place in Singapore.
I think the talks are important in the context. If we look at what Philippines is doing for some time, so they are trying to provocate China on one issue or another issue. It is happening since this president has taken the office. He is openly criticizing China and he is siding with US policy, and he has signed, again they have initiated the process to their defense cooperation, and they have established new bases in Philippines. US is establishing a new bases in Philippines, and they are trying to upgrade the existing bases in Philippines, and especially 2 or 3 bases which are very close to the Taiwan. These are very important developments, because on one side when the US talk about the Taiwan, so they say we want to do something and we will protect them, like blah blah blah, and then at the same time Philippines give them bases to build in the neighborhood of Taiwan. That is very provocating. So that's why the things are not getting settled down right now. One thing, and second thing, if we look at their actions and talks, US talks are not matching with their action. When they talk about the meeting is constructive, positive, and we are helping and we are trying to re-establish the communication and other things, but simultaneously they are pitching different actors and they are trying to encircle China. South China Sea is the one problem.
And I was about to get to this point, because as you say, both the nations are in the talk process, but there is so many things happening which make us believe that these talks perhaps are not wholeheartedly made from the US's side. And one of my personal observations was that when we talk about the southern Chinese Ocean, things have been escalating for last several years. We have seen one alliance being shored up after another one, and the developments of the naval bases that you have, of the naval presence that you have just pointed out.
Look, it is from 2011 when the Obama administration was there, when they came up with the idea of the Pivotal Asia policy. So they started to focus on South China Sea as a potential place where they can engage China in a hot conflict. They perceive it is important, or it is essential to check the peaceful rise of China, and they are putting in place different alliances from their own world. If you look around, one is this Philippines, and other one is on the other side. One side is the South China Sea, on the other side East China Sea. They are putting alliances with Japan. And Japan has made a policy from 2019 to 2014. They will spend almost $240 billion to upgrade their weaponry and all the defense system. And one of the key area is the dispute with the Chinese on the different islands. And US trying to become the part of also of that dispute by saying this, we have a treaty with Japan and we will be the partner with Japan in any event in the future. So it is not only the South China Sea, it is East China Sea also. Then to look at the third dimension, Asia Pacific. They have came up with the idea of the Quad. So Quad, initially it was, although it was established just for after tsunami, just to put in the place a different mechanism to counter these disasters, but later on systematically and step by step they developed it to an anti-China forum, so anti-China alliance. So in these all actions, when you are putting all these actions on the ground, you are trying to encircle China, and you are also trying to entangle China in the Ukraine and Russia crisis. So then how you can say your talks can be successful? Because your talks.
But Ramay sahab, what have been actually the fate of these alliances? Because from where we are seeing it, this looks mere optics. It's a lot of defense budget being expensed, but yet you don't see a tangible thing coming on ground. No country has tried to actually create problems for China, perhaps.
There is a one point which I think we need to understand. It's a Chinese policy. They are very patient. They are trying to show the maximum patience, and US is trying to create or engage China in the conflict for the long time. It is not only South China Sea or the East China Sea. If you look around in the late 90s, then the incident of the pilot, they crossed their border. So then Hong Kong issue. So then there is a Xinjiang issue. Then there is Tibet. So they are trying to engage China in the conflict at different names. For example, if you look at the Xinjiang, they are using the Xinjiang shield just to antagonize Muslim countries, because they understand China is creating new alliances and strengthening the existing partnership with Muslim countries, like Arab China summit in yesterday. It concluded yesterday, and then Pakistani Prime Minister is going to China. So they are using the Xinjiang to create a wedge between China and the Muslim countries. If they care about the human rights, why they are silent on the Gaza, where the thousands of the Muslims has been killed? Even children, they are not leaving the children. The children are starving there. So where is the human right? And where, leave alone the Muslims, where is the human rights? They are not even taking care of the lives. So they are trying to create a web of chaos in the surrounding of China, but China is showing the patience. China is not becoming emotional, but definitely there would be a limit to that patience.
Let me point out towards India, that has been a very important and pertinent member of the Quad Alliance, that have been showed up against the Chinese, as you have pointed out yourself, and at the same time is a member of BRICS, which stands with the Chinese, the nations that are standing with China.
SCO also.
And SCO also. How do you see this? Because this looks to be two different poles. Chinese are being militarily and diplomatically engaged at the same time.
Actually, India want to show that they are pursuing very independent policy. On one hand, they are very close to US, and on the other hand, they want to become the champion of the South, global South, which is not possible. And the global South have shown them they are not the champion, or they are not the leader of the global South. They were dreaming the place like they had in the time of the Nehru. So they wanted to repeat that period. They wanted to look like a leader of the global South. That's why they become part of the BRICS, they become part of the SCO. But again, like US, their talks are not matching their actions. Because when we come on the Asia Pacific and the Quad, they are actually pursuing the hard policy against China.
But my intention was to understand, how does China look into India? Are they looking towards India as a rival, as a military power that is trying to frighten them?
There is no rivalry. The reason is that there is no match between India and China. China is too big. For rivalry, you need to be somehow the comparable size. Like we can talk about China and US, they are the rivals. They are strategic rivals. But China and India, they have no comparison. So they are dreaming, they are posturing, they are very big economy, very big player, but they are not. Even whenever the US wants, they put the ban on different things for them, and even in the case of the visas. So they are trying to, what I am saying, they are trying to posture, they are very big players. Actually it is not. If you look at their different indicators of development or the security, for example, leave alone the development at this point of time. Look at their security. What is their production level, defense production system? How many technology they have, indigenous technologies? Either they are producing the jets or the satellites or a number of other things. No, they are importing the technology. By importing, you cannot become a great power. On the other hand, China, they have making everything themselves. Even they are leading in certain technologies, like the velocity based, their missile systems. If you look at their intelligence, artificial intelligence based war system. So they are quite ahead from the world.
Ramay sahab, when you talk about technology, it is also very significant to note that China has done a lot, have taken big technological leaps. And you have been there recently. You might agree with me on this, that if you be to United States and if you be to Shanghai, there's a huge difference. You can actually see the technology being changed. China has become the largest manufacturer of automobiles as well as many other technologies and the semiconductors as well. How would the United States would be looking into the technological developments being made by China?
This is the key area of the conflict. I give you one example. When Mr. Donald Trump, he was the president, he was briefing media. So he categorically mentioned, so we cannot allow any country to surpass us in the future technology. So that is the area of the conflict.
Which China has done, by the way.
The way they want to check and they want to reverse the process of the technology development in China. You want to look at that in China, there was a ranking by an Australian think tank. They rank the 44 critical technologies in the world. Who is the leader in that? In 37 technologies, China was leader.
37 out of 44.
44, one thing. And second
led
thing,
by China.
So one thing, and second thing, US have introduced Chips and the Science Act. They are putting different bans and other things. Look around, if a chip or semiconductor industries, 60% rare earth metals are being produced in China. 85% rare earth metals are being processed in China. 90% high frequency magnet rare earth metals are being created in China. If China put ban, so what will be the future? What will be the status of the global?
So, do you think this economic warfare is going to continue?
That's what I'm saying. US cannot beat China, because if tomorrow China put a ban on the rare earth metal, export of rare earth metals are their processing. So, what will be the status of the global semiconductor industry, the chips?
Ramay sir, do you actually believe, with the wildest stretch of your imaginations, that United States would actually want China to be involved in a practical military conflict?
They want, but they cannot, because US has this habit to attack or engage in a conflict where they see so opponent cannot match them. So, or at least they can win. In the early 2000s, so Rand Corporation, they have published one report. They said the US Army, they was doing the games, war games, by considering China, and in every war game they found they cannot defeat China.
It's a published report of Rand.
I think it is something official documents. You can find. I think you can find it. You can find it. So in war games, they cannot compete. They cannot defeat. Neither China can defeat USA, nor US can defeat China. It will be disaster for both of them. That's China is trying to make US understand. Let's work together. One thing, and second thing, decoupling is not an option at this point of time. And hundreds of billions of trade is happening between two countries. All their major brands are the companies, like you can talk about Tesla, you can talk about Apple, you can talk about other companies. They are heavily investing in China. If you talk about Europe, BMW, Bosch, you name the big company of any country, they are investing in China, because the market size is huge, and the facilitation is huge, the infrastructure is huge, and the social sector is excellent. So in all economic rationals, they cannot lose it, because in next 20 years China will be transforming its population, and they will be transiting their population from one class to other, from lower class to middle class to the upper class, and the volume would be around about 800 million people.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Shakeel Ahmad Ramay, for being guest in our show. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a break and we'll join you back with second segment of the program. Stay with us. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's been 13 months since the Sudani war has broken out. This is a very interesting and intricate, complicated process of war that is going on in Sudan. It's the regular army of Sudan fighting against the paramilitary forces of Sudan, where one general of Sudan is trying to overthrow the other general of Sudan. And as a process, a humanitarian catastrophe has unfolded, which has affected millions of people who are displaced. The country has become one of the worst victims of a guerrilla war that is running on between two regular forces of the country. The problem is that this huge humanitarian crisis is not being paid any attention by the major international actors who are actually more involved in watching Gaza's genocide, silently or communicating or talking or focusing on the issue of Russia and Ukraine. So to talk about this very pertinent issue, I have invited Julius Mbaluto after a long time. He is joining me on Skype from United Kingdom. He's an award-winning international journalist who specializes in African affairs. Julius, I welcome you to the show.
Thank you. Always pleasure.
Julius, help us to have a current situation report. What is happening as of now when we speak about Sudan? What is the situation right now? Has one of the powers completely overthrown the other one, or still the dogfight is running on?
Well, as we all know, since I think last year, the war started with the Sudanese National Army fighting with rapid support forces. The war is still ongoing as of now. But actually, since it started, it's gotten worse. We are talking about thousands have been killed, and we are talking about millions displaced. Just to put this into proper perspective, I mean, I saw a UN report talking about right now over 25 million Sudanese cannot live without humanitarian support. And when we even look into this, there's a lot that has happened which has worsened the situation. We're talking about 70% of the health infrastructure in Sudan is gone. We're talking about also like in May, 130 people died because the hospital they were in El Fashar was actually, there was shelling, violent shelling happening there. And what has also happened, which is even worse now, it seems these two forces, the National Army and Rapid Support Forces, they don't seem to care that much, because all this shelling happening also is going to places like marketplaces, and that tells you a lot of civilians are getting killed. So this is exactly what's happening in Sudan, and of course, as you know, it carries on. You know, there's no clear indication of where we are going with this as of now. I mean, that's all I can say for now.
Julius, you very rightly pointed out the humanitarian crisis. You have mentioned 70% of the health infrastructure is gone. 25 million Sudanese are requiring the international support. Help us to understand what is happening on this forefront. Have one of the powers completely overthrown the other one, or still the dogfight is going on? What is happening?
Yeah, we have seen the National Army taking cities. They seem to be having like a stronger kind of opposition right now, because they've taken a couple of cities from RSF. And as we are talking of the latest that happened in May, we are talking about this city known as El Fashar. Right now it's besieged city, but as we speak, after the violent shelling and 130 people dying in Sudanese hospital, the city is under siege, and we are talking about right now is kind of in the hands of the National Army. So National Army seems to have been doing a little bit better than the Rapid Support Forces.
And while we are saying that the army is in a better position, this certainly means that the other force, which is RSF, has completely not surrendered. They must be fighting in their own pockets of resistance amid a lot of human casualty.
No, they are definitely fighting. They haven't given up. So it's still ongoing. And with war, you never know. One wins some sections, other areas, and sometimes the whole thing is reversed. So we're talking about fighting that has been happening for like close over 1 year right now. So no one knows who will be where tomorrow in terms of these two fighting forces.
How has been the international response so far of this conflict? What I can see from here in Pakistan, the feeling is that perhaps Sudan has not been paid the kind of attention versus the degree of conflict that it is versus the number of people that it has affected so far.
Oh, the international approach has not been that great. as we are talking right now, as you rightly put it, embassies have been laid on Ukraine and even Gaza. And even when you talk about the global community, you see the socialization is immediate response to what's happening in Gaza. And even Ukraine was the main focus before that. So when it comes to Sudan, it's like forgotten area, forgotten crisis. And in terms of its approach, I can see very important institution like United Nations making very desperate kind of statement. Of course, they are calling upon the recent approach they made was to call upon the international community to support Sudan. And in this kind of appeal, it's not like they haven't thrown infrastructure there to begin to solve the crisis. And you and me know the same way you have United Nations screaming about Gaza, humanitarian crisis in Gaza, humanitarian crisis in Ukraine, is still the same way. I'm not saying the same way. It's the same case with Sudan, whereby they will talk, but I think they are focused to do a lot more in Gaza than Sudan, and that's where the challenge is. I've seen them talking about United Nations saying that for right now, Sudan needs over 4 billion US dollars at least to begin to address the crisis, humanitarian crisis, especially access to food and water, just your basic stuff that a lot of people are not able to, to afford right now in Sudan.
Julius, what about the war crimes? There are allegations of very serious war crimes. When I say war crimes, this not only mean collective punishment, this also means a lot of rapes, abductions, enslavements. Is at least the African media talking about it?
There has been reports of war crimes, and these reports are coming from Human Rights Watch, and of course they are talking about rapes, they are talking about killings, but also they are talking about ethnic cleansing. That seems to be the case most of the time when it comes to talking about genocide. So ethnic cleansing has been very key over there. RSF seems to be the one, on the spotlight right now. RSF has been accused of tremendously doing this a lot more. And we are seeing also two key places or two key elements of this story is to focus on West Darfur, which is the most affected. They're talking about the leader of RSF, Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, and also the key areas of focus whereby the ethnic cleansing dimension of the conflict is taking place is between mostly driven by resources, and this is between non-Arab farming communities and Arab pastoralist communities within that area, and this is where we have seen, I think they're talking about over 15,000 feared to have been killed in West Darfur as we are speaking right now.
Lastly, Julius, will you like to tell us about the way you think this conflict looks like? I mean, do you see it being concluded in the near future, or do you see it as long-term process going on, ensuring further fatigue for the people of this very unfortunate country?
When we talk about Sudan, I've seen it all in terms of the way it is started, of course, with so many coups, attempted coups, and we're talking about the most wonderful moment was to see the peaceful revolution that happened, and it is sent the former president Omar Bashir packing. But I made an observation there. I say that we cannot celebrate because Omar Bashir seems to have divided the military, and that has come to pass right now. Now, where we are right now is conflict between two military groups. As we are speaking right now, the international community has started to show some interest in the Sudan issue, and we have UK especially fronted campaign, which they are also demanding accountability in terms of Sudan, and they are talking about putting sanctions to Sudan, and also they are talking also about United Nations arm that investigates genocide, that body to be based in Sudan, and also not just that as well, ICC, International Criminal Court, also to have people on the ground to investigate impartially whether it's the government-fronted forces or whether it's rapid support forces are committing all these genocidal crimes. They should be investigated, and the message is going there across. Of course, this was fronted by UK Foreign Commonwealth Office Department, but it's been adopted within the United Nations. So as we speak right now, it's happening on the ground. And also UK is calling upon the United Nations Security Council to put pressure on the warring parties. Number one, to cease fire, to stop fighting, so as to give kind of opportunity for peace as we are speaking right now. How far does that go? Only time will tell. I just want to say that from my observation, the international system is pretty much stressed, very much stressed. When you talk about Ukraine, talk about Gaza, there hasn't been resolution. We will come on Africa in the ground.
Your point is taken, Julius. We are running out of time. Thank you very much for being guests in our show. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a break and we'll join you back with last segment of the program. Stay with us. Welcome back to the last segment of the program. The war in Russia and Ukraine has taken a very surprising turn, and the turn is that the United States has officially allowed Ukrainian side to use the American-made ammunition to attack inside Russia. This is a very serious provocation, which was announced by no one else but the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken himself, who has confirmed that the White House has allowed Ukraine to use. And the background of this is that there are serious developments on the war front where Russia has not only gained territory but has also started making the Ukrainian defense look quite feeble and fragile. It's a lot of destruction that has happened to the infrastructure and to the defense capability of the Ukrainian side. What America is thinking at the moment, and how does it align with the United States foreign policy? To speak about this pertinent issue, I have invited Dr. Hussain Soherwordi, who is a professor of international relations from Peshawar University and is joining me on Skype. Dr. Sahab, I welcome you to the show.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Sahab, help us to understand the primary reason why United States would make such a serious provocation against Russia.
The reasons are quite obvious at the moment. One thing, let me clear that technically speaking, it is in fact defensively they have allowed Ukraine to use American weapons, or for that matter, Western weapons, or NATO-supplied weapons, because with the United States, Germany and Britain have also signaled that they can openly use their weapons against Russia defensively, which means that wherever they are fighting with each other, they can attack on that. There are two types of weapons, especially missiles, that have been provided to them. One is long range, that is 200 kilometers, and the other is GLMRS, which is 40 kilometers. And this 40 kilometers one is allowed, but still it is lesser than that, because the Russians ones, they attack from their own territory, which is out of the range of what weapon has been supplied to Ukraine. And therefore, they were quite frustrated over this. They wanted to have a fight with them on behalf of NATO, and they were provided weapons which were in fact not hitting the enemy, and therefore all this took place. Now, despite all these concerns, such a development could further escalate the conflict at the same time, because several European leaders have recently called for restrictions of the weapons. However, with this American support and allowing them, many have ganged up now and they are supporting Ukraine. So now probably the game of this entire war, its disposition will soon be changed, because we are anticipating that now it would not be like Russians having upper hand if gradually they allow Ukraine, when I say they, I mean NATO allows Ukraine to use weapons openly, supplied to them by themselves. I believe that that would be the time when Russia will think twice to have an attack on the civilian population in Ukraine, and especially that region which has in fact made this entire issue to the fore, and that is Kharkiv, that region where Russians are quite having a superior.
Dr. Saab, thank you very much for pointing out the Kharkiv region's significance, and certainly the progress that the Russian military has made there is a point of concern. But what strategic benefits do you believe the West, the NATO, or the United States at large, which by the way is the driving force behind NATO, is going to accomplish out of it? Is it to slow down the Russian onslaught, or do you think there are some other behind the curtain agenda?
It's not the question of slowing down and are making it fast. The point is that NATO in general was losing credibility. If Ukraine loses war, this means that entire NATO will lose war. So they are supplying restricted number and quality and the quantity of weapons to Ukraine, but at the same time they are claiming that they are fighting war in Ukraine against Russia. So Ukraine in the recent past was in fact struggling to have more and more successes as far as war was proceeding ahead it was concerned. So there must have been some detailed discussions between NATO allies, thinking that this will embarrass them in general, and that is one of the big reasons that it was not only Joe Biden. Rather, after Joe Biden, numerous other European countries have also claimed that their weapon supply to Ukraine will be given with open allowance and permission to use against Russia. So I believe it is the credibility that is more in question at the moment, rather than the fasting or slowing of the war.
Dr. Saab, as the American elections are also approaching within this year, let me give you some numbers. So $51 billion had been approved first by the Senate. Then there is another $250 billion of the Russian assets frozen by the European countries, which the United States has influenced, is still in the process to be used for Ukraine. And then there is another $3 billion of the Russian money in America, which is going to be routed. Now, with all of this lavish expenditure being made to rescue Ukraine, how difficult it will be to stand in front of the public for Joe Biden a few months down the road and justify that we have not been able to rescue Ukraine despite all this lavish expenditures?
Yes, that is really a very good question, because at the moment when I'm speaking with people or policy influencers in United States, they are quite concerned about the effects of the Ukrainian war on the forthcoming presidential elections. The question is that right now Joe Biden is supporting the war. What is the second option then? Is the second candidate that is Donald Trump, is he stating that he will withdraw from there? Well, no, in fact not. The question is that all these countries that are part and parcel of NATO, they are all for one and one for all kind of principle. They are following that, and therefore they cannot retreat from there. So what the statistical data that you have just mentioned is noted down by all and sundry there in the US, especially the people, of course, because they are the ones who are quite concerned. They do not want to get involved into a prolonged war like Afghanistan. However, at the same time, if they are part and parcel of NATO, especially they are leaders of NATO, they have to have such kind of expenses. That these military alliances, they are very expensive in their nature. If one gets associated with them, one have to have a very huge kitty to spend in these kind of wars, especially when your entire group is concerned about the emergence of another great power that probably would challenge them. And in this war's case, it is Russia that is in fact showing its knuckles and asking them to remain away from its borders, and NATO is trying to encroach into its territory.
And Dr. Saab, last question, how do you see Europe's politics being affected? Because Europe's stakes are very high in this war. We have seen Europe has also taken the brunt of the cutoff of gas supplies, for which United States has played a very large role. Also, we have noticed that the cost of business in Europe has escalated. The Ukrainians that are suffering from the war are coming to Europe. So this war is effectively hurting Europe more than it is hurting the United States. How do you think the politics is going to respond to a failure in case if it's a failure?
Yeah, you very rightly pointed out this energy crisis and business effect. This war has done damage to the Europeans. At the same time, they have to share interest in nuclear safety, nuclear security, non-proliferation, counterterrorism, space exploration. All these things were in fact jointly done in the past with Russia, and now these will be very badly affected due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Relations became very tense between the, if I may say clearly, West and some of the Eastern European countries after the United States imposed sanctions even against Russia, and Europeans followed. Future is not having something really nice for this kind of relationship with Europe or with the US. Moreover, failing to back Ukraine would call into question Americans and European support for democracies worldwide. So Europeans have to see into that as well, that we are supporting democracies, and thereby they are undermining the viability of democracy as a way of organizing any society's political life. So that is also one of the part and principles of their foreign policy. So they do not want to be swayed away from in that at the same time. Moreover, Russian aggrandizement in itself is a challenge to the key principles, mostly unspecified, but seemingly notions that powerful states should not use force to impose their will on weaker actors, and that violations of state sovereignty should not be tolerated, are some of the things that Europeans at the moment would really support. They would say that no such aggrandized nation should be allowed. So I believe that Europeans, led by US, NATO, vis-a-vis Russia, I don't think that I'm going to find some kind of a nice relationship between them in the future, in the near future or in the long term.
Dr. Hussain, Shaheed, Soherwordi, thank you very much for being guest in our show. Ladies and gentlemen, as our last guest has pointed out, this war has become very expensive for the people of Europe, for the people of Ukraine, and also for the people of Russia. It is once again a reminder to the entire world that diplomacy should be given a chance to settle the international disputes. We'll join you next week with another program. And until then, Allah Hafiz.